Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant and watched the stars through the main screen. The year was 2387, and humans had built homes on 12 different star systems. They had colonies on distant planets and trading posts scattered across their small corner of the galaxy. Everything seemed normal that morning when the silence began. Lieutenant Maria Santos sat at her communication station trying to contact Earth. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls, but nothing worked. No signals came through the hyperspace network, no messages from Mars Command or the outer colonies. The communication system that connected all human worlds had gone completely quiet. Jake walked over to Maria's station. "What's happening with the network?" he asked. Maria shook her head and kept trying different frequencies. "I don't know, sir. Everything was working fine an hour ago. Now I can't reach anyone beyond our local area." The bridge crew looked worried. Dr. Lisa Harper came up from the science lab. She was the ship's chief science officer and always had answers when strange things happened. "Commander, I've been monitoring all the usual channels. There are no automated signals, no distress calls. Nothing. It's like every human settlement just stopped talking at the same time." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. The hyperspace communication network never failed completely. Even during the worst space storms or equipment failures, some signals always got through. But now there was only silence where millions of voices should be. Hours passed and still nothing changed. The Defiant was on routine patrol near the edge of human space. They were supposed to check on mining operations and make sure trade routes stayed safe. But now Jake had to make a difficult choice. Should they continue their patrol or investigate what happened to the communication network? "Set course for New Haven Colony," Jake ordered. New Haven was the closest human settlement, only 2 days away by hyperspace jump. If something was wrong with the network, they would find answers there. The jump to New Haven went normally. The ship's engines hummed as they moved through hyperspace. But when they arrived at the colony world, Jake knew something terrible had happened. The planet looked normal from space. Cities were still there, and the orbital stations seemed undamaged. But there were no ships moving between the stations and no radio signals coming from the surface. "Take us into orbit," Jake told the pilot. "Send a standard greeting to colony control." Maria tried to contact the surface but got no answer. The landing bays were empty, and the Space Traffic Control Center was silent. Dr. Harper ran scans of the planet from orbit. "Life signs are very strange, Commander. I'm reading plant life and small animals, but no large life forms. No human biosignatures at all." She looked up from her instruments with concern. "It's like all the people just disappeared." Jake ordered a landing party to investigate. He took Dr. Harper, 2 security officers, and an engineer named Pete Rogers down to the main city. Their shuttle landed in the central plaza where thousands of people should have been walking around. Instead, the place was empty and quiet. The buildings were perfect. Cars sat in parking areas with their engines off. Restaurants had food still on tables that looked like people had just stepped away. In one office building, computers were still running and coffee cups sat half full on desks. But there were no people anywhere. Dr. Harper took readings with her scanner. There are no signs of violence or struggle. No bodies, no blood, nothing that suggests a fight. People were here and then they weren't. She found something else that made her worry more. "I'm detecting strange energy readings in the atmosphere. This isn't any technology we know about." Pete Rogers checked the colony's power systems and computer networks. Everything was working normally. The automatic systems that ran the water treatment plants and power generators were still operating. Whatever happened here, it didn't damage any equipment. It only affected living things. They searched for hours but found no clues about where 500,000 colonists could have gone. In the government building, they found meeting rooms with papers scattered on tables like people had left in the middle of important discussions. Children's toys lay in parks where kids had been playing. But every human being had simply vanished without any trace. Back on the Defiant, Dr. Harper studied the energy readings she had collected. This technology is far beyond anything humans have developed. The energy signature suggests something that can manipulate matter at levels we barely understand. Whatever did this could remove organic material while leaving everything else untouched. Jake felt the weight of command pressing down on him. If one colony had been attacked this way, others might be in danger too. He ordered the ship to jump to another nearby settlement called Freeman Station. When they arrived, they found the same thing. Empty buildings, running machinery, and no people. At the third colony they checked. Long-range sensors detected something that made everyone on. The bridge freeze. Massive energy signatures were moving through space near the outer edge of the system. The signatures were huge, much larger than any human ship ever built. How big are those contacts? Jake asked the sensor operator. At least 10 times larger than our biggest dreadnoughts, sir. And they're using technology that makes our sensors struggle to get clear readings. Whatever they are, they're not human ships. Dr. Harper studied the sensor data, and her face went pale. Commander, these readings match the energy signatures I found on the planet's surfaces. I think we're looking at whatever took our people. Jake stared at the sensor display showing the alien contacts moving through space. For the first time in human history, they had encountered something from outside their small corner of the galaxy. Something powerful enough to make entire colonies disappear without a trace. All hands, this is the commander, he announced over the ship's communication system. We have encountered evidence of alien contact. Hostile alien contact. Prepare for emergency protocols and possible combat situations. The crew worked quickly to ready the ship for whatever might come next. Jake knew that the Defiant was just one small exploration vessel. If these aliens had destroyed entire colonies, his ship would not be able to fight them. But they might be able to gather information that could help other humans prepare. As the alien signatures moved closer, Jake realized that humanity had just learned they were not alone in the universe. And whatever shared the galaxy with them did not seem interested in being friendly neighbors. The first time Jake Morrison saw a harvester ship, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The vessel appeared on the main screen like a massive crystal that seemed to shift and change as he watched it. The alien ship was enormous, easily 10 times larger than the biggest human dreadnought, and it moved through space in ways that hurt to look at. It's phasing in and out of normal space, Dr. Harper said from her station. Her voice was quiet with fear and amazement. The ship exists. In multiple dimensions at once? Our sensors can barely track it because it keeps shifting between different states of reality. The crystalline vessel ignored the Defiant completely. It moved toward the inner system where more human colonies waited. Jake ordered his ship to follow at a safe distance while they tried to learn more about these aliens. He needed to understand what humanity was facing. 2 days later, they received a desperate transmission from Captain Alan Pierce, commanding the heavy cruiser UES Vigilant. The message came through broken and full of static. Pierce's voice was strained with panic as explosions echoed in the background. This is Captain Pierce to any human vessels. The aliens call themselves the Harvester Collective. They are not here to conquer us. They consider us a contamination that must be cleaned from the galaxy. They have been doing this for thousands of years to hundreds of different species. The transmission cut to static for several seconds before Pierce's voice returned. They don't see us as enemies to fight. They see us as germs to be sterilized. Our weapons barely scratch their ships, and they can phase through our defenses. They are heading for Earth, and there is nothing we can do to stop them. The final part of the message was the hardest to hear. Pierce was shouting over alarms and the sound of his ship breaking apart. Tell Earth to prepare for extinction. These things have killed entire civilizations. We are not the first, and we will not be the last. Pierce out. After that, the UES Vigilant went silent forever. Dr. Harper worked day and night trying to understand the alien technology. She managed to intercept some of the communications between harvester ships. The alien language was impossible to understand at first, but their computers could analyze patterns and guess at meanings. What they learned made everyone on the ship feel sick with fear. The harvesters had been traveling through the galaxy for 50,000 years. They found young civilizations and destroyed them completely. They believed that biological life was a disease that made the universe impure. Their mission was to clean every world until only perfect emptiness remained. The intercepted messages showed that hundreds of species had already been eliminated. Entire star systems had been sterilized and left empty. The harvesters kept detailed records of every civilization they destroyed. Humans were just the latest entry in their long list of exterminated races. "They have technology we can't even understand," Dr. Harper explained to Jake. "They can manipulate matter at the quantum level. They can phase through solid objects and strike from dimensions we can't see. Their ships are powered by forces that bend the rules of physics." Engineer Pete Rogers had been studying the sensor readings from harvester ships. He found something interesting that gave everyone a small bit of hope. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but it's also very complex. Everything they do requires perfect calculations and precise control. Our technology is simple and unpredictable compared to theirs. Jake didn't understand what Pete meant until they encountered their first harvester scout ship near an asteroid field. The alien vessel was smaller than the others, but still twice the size of the Defiant. It moved to intercept them with clear, hostile intentions. Jake knew his ship could not fight the alien vessel and win. Human weapons would not damage the advanced harvester technology. Their shields would not stop the alien energy beams. In a normal battle, the Defiant would be destroyed in seconds. Instead of trying to fight or run away, Jake made a decision that surprised everyone on the bridge. He ordered the ship to ram directly into a large asteroid at full speed. The impact tore apart the asteroid and damaged the Defiant badly, but the explosion created a massive cloud of debris and energy that confused the harvester ship sensors. While the alien vessel tried to locate them in the chaos, Jake ordered an emergency jump to hyperspace. The jump was dangerous, so close to the asteroid field, but it worked. The Defiant escaped while the harvester ship was still trying to figure out what had happened. Why did that work? Maria Santos asked when they were safely away. Pete Rogers was checking the damage reports, but he was smiling. Because they couldn't predict what we would do. Their computers are designed to counter logical, sophisticated tactics. They expect other advanced civilizations to fight them with careful planning and superior technology. Dr. Harper nodded as she understood what Pete meant. But we didn't use logic or advanced tactics. We did something crazy and desperate that their prediction systems couldn't calculate. We crashed into an asteroid on purpose. No advanced civilization would consider that a reasonable battle strategy. Jake realized that humanity might have one advantage against the harvesters. Human tactics were often chaotic and unpredictable. When facing impossible odds, humans tended to try desperate things that made no logical sense. This randomness might be the one thing the ancient aliens could not counter. Over the next few days, they received scattered reports from other human ships that had survived the initial attacks. Every message told the same story. Direct confrontation with harvester ships meant certain death. But some human vessels had escaped by doing unexpected and seemingly suicidal things. One cargo ship had escaped by ejecting all their cargo and detonating it like a massive bomb. Another had survived by flying directly into a star's corona and using the radiation to hide from alien sensors. A passenger liner had been saved when the captain ordered everyone to sing at the same time, creating sound vibrations that somehow interfered with harvester scanning equipment. None of these tactics should have worked against such advanced technology. But they did work because they were completely irrational and unpredictable. Jake began to understand that this war would not be won with superior firepower or advanced technology. Humans would have to fight like humans, using their natural talent for chaos and their stubborn refusal to follow logical battle plans. The harvesters had spent 50,000 years destroying civilizations that tried to fight them with sophisticated strategies and advanced weapons. They had never encountered a species that would deliberately crash into asteroids or fly into stars just to confuse their enemies. As more reports came in from surviving human ships, Jake realized that the galaxy was about to learn something new about warfare. Sometimes the best way to fight a superior enemy was to stop trying to be smart and start being completely unpredictable instead. The Defiant set course for the outer Sol system where the remnants of the human fleet were gathering. Jake knew they were heading toward the final battle for humanity's survival. But for the first time since the attacks began, he felt a small spark of hope. The Harvesters might be ancient and powerful, but they had never faced an enemy quite like humans before. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center of Titan Station and watched the most hopeless military situation in human history unfold on the tactical displays. Less than 200 ships of various sizes floated around the massive defense platform that guarded the outer edge of the Sol system. These were all that remained of humanity's once proud space fleet. The numbers were terrifying to consider. Intelligence reports showed that the Harvester fleet contained thousands of ships, each one capable of destroying entire planets. Their advanced scouts had already begun sterilizing the outer colonies of the Sol system. Military analysts estimated that Earth had perhaps 3 weeks before the final assault would begin. Kate had been one of the few high-ranking officers to escape the initial Harvester attacks. Most of the fleet command structure had been wiped out when the aliens hit the major naval bases first. Now she found herself in charge of humanity's last stand with resources that any rational person would consider completely inadequate. Captain Roy Henderson approached her with a datapad full of grim statistics. Admiral, we've completed the inventory of available ships and supplies. We have 47 military vessels of various classes, ranging from destroyers to one badly damaged battleship. The rest are converted civilian ships, cargo haulers, mining vessels, and passenger liners that volunteers have modified for combat. Kate looked at the list of ships and felt the weight of impossible responsibility. What about our weapons and defenses? Roy's expression was grave. Our conventional weapons have proven ineffective against Harvester technology. Their ships can phase through most of our attacks, and their shields absorb energy weapons like their flashlights. The only successes we've had come from unpredictable tactics that catch them off guard. Dr. Lisa Harper had arrived at Titan Station aboard the Defiant and was working around the clock in the research labs. She had been studying captured Harvester technology and looking for any weakness that humanity could exploit. The alien devices they had recovered were nearly impossible to understand, but she was making some progress. Their technology relies on quantum calculations that require perfect mathematical precision, she explained to Kate during one of their strategy meetings. Every action they take is based on complex probability equations that predict outcomes with near-perfect accuracy. But when we do something completely random and chaotic, it creates interference patterns that disrupt their calculations. Meanwhile, civilian volunteers were working frantically to prepare for the coming battle. Engineer Nancy Kim led teams that were modifying cargo ships and mining vessels into improvised warships. They welded armor plating onto civilian hulls and mounted whatever weapons they could find. The results were ugly and ungainly, but they were ships that could fight. Pilot Joe Barnes was training civilian crews to fly combat missions in vessels that were never designed for warfare. Most of these people are cargo pilots and passenger transport operators, he told Kate. They don't know military tactics, but that might actually help us. They think differently than trained military pilots. The first major test of humanity's desperate defense came when a Harvester scouting force approached Titan Station. 23 crystalline ships phased into normal space and began scanning the human positions. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never encountered serious resistance. Kate ordered the defense platforms to open fire, but as expected, most of the weapons passed harmlessly through the phasing Harvester vessels. The few shots that did connect were absorbed by alien shields without causing any visible damage. The Harvesters began their own attack, sending beams of energy that tore through human ships like they were made of paper. That's when Commander Jake Morrison led his squadron of modified civilian vessels in what appeared to be a suicidal charge directly at the largest Harvester ship. Instead of using conventional weapons, Morrison had loaded his ships with overcharged reactor cores set to detonate on impact. "All ships, follow my lead," Morrison transmitted to his squadron. "We're going to ram them and blow our reactors. Make every shot count because we won't get a second chance." The civilian pilots followed Morrison without hesitation. Cargo haulers and passenger liners that had been converted into makeshift warships accelerated toward the alien fleet at maximum speed. The harvesters tried to target them, but the human ships were flying in completely random patterns that made accurate prediction impossible. When the first human ship reached the harvester flagship, the pilot detonated his reactor at point-blank range. The explosion created a massive burst of chaotic quantum energy that temporarily disrupted the alien ship's phasing ability. For a few crucial seconds, the harvester vessel became solid and vulnerable. The other human ships followed suit, ramming into alien vessels and detonating their reactors in coordinated suicide attacks. The tactic cost 37 human lives, but it disabled 6 harvester ships and forced the rest to retreat. It was the first time in recorded galactic history that a harvester fleet had been driven off by an inferior force. Word of the victory spread through the scattered human resistance like wildfire. For the first time since the attacks began, people dared to hope that maybe humanity could survive this war. The impossible had happened. Human ships had actually damaged and defeated harvester vessels. Dr. Harper studied the sensor readings from the battle and made an important discovery. The quantum explosions from our reactor detonations create interference patterns that disrupt their dimensional phasing. When their ships become solid, they're vulnerable to conventional weapons. The problem is that the effect only lasts for a few seconds. Kate began planning larger operations based on what they had learned. If we can create bigger quantum disruptions, we might be able to disable multiple harvester ships simultaneously. Then our conventional weapons could finish them off while they're still solid. Captain Roy Henderson was already working on modifications to their remaining ships. "We can rig more vessels for reactor detonation, but we need volunteers willing to make one-way trips. This tactic requires crews to stay aboard until the last second to ensure proper detonation." The call for volunteers was answered immediately. Pilots like Rachel Stone and engineers like Tony Graham stepped forward without hesitation. They understood that they were volunteering for suicide missions, but they also knew that their sacrifice might save humanity from extinction. As preparations continued, more scattered human ships arrived at Titan Station. Each vessel brought stories of harvester attacks and desperate escapes. The pattern was always the same. Conventional tactics failed completely, but random and chaotic actions sometimes worked. A cargo ship had escaped by jettisoning its entire load of grain, creating a cloud that confused harvester sensors. A passenger liner had survived by playing loud music that somehow interfered with alien communication systems. A mining vessel had gotten away by detonating explosive charges in a seemingly random pattern that the harvesters couldn't predict. Kate realized that humanity's greatest weapon was not any technology or military strategy. It was their natural tendency toward chaos and unpredictability. Humans had a talent for doing things that made no logical sense, and this randomness was the one thing the ancient aliens could not calculate or counter. "We're going to fight them the human way," Kate announced to the assembled fleet commanders. "No careful planning, no logical strategies. We're going to be as chaotic and unpredictable as possible. We're going to do things that are so crazy that their computers won't be able to figure out what we're planning next." The Harvester main fleet was approaching the inner Sol system, but humanity was no longer the helpless prey that had been slaughtered. In the outer colonies, they had learned how to fight back, and they were ready to show the galaxy that some species refused to go quietly into extinction. The Harvester main fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system like a dark storm made of crystalline energy. Thousands of alien ships phased into normal space, each one radiating power that made the fabric of space itself ripple and bend. Their presence was so overwhelming that human sensors struggled to count them all. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the battleship UES indomitable, and watched the impossible enemy approach Earth. Every tactical analysis showed the same result. Humanity had no chance of survival. The Harvester fleet was simply too large and too powerful. But Kate had learned something important about humans during the past few weeks. They did their best work when facing impossible odds. Commander Beth Walsh led a small squadron of modified fighters on hit-and-run attacks against the Harvester advanced scouts. Her tactics were so unorthodox that they bordered on insanity. Instead of attacking from predictable angles, her pilots would fly directly through asteroid fields while firing randomly in all directions. Sometimes they would even attack their own targets multiple times from different angles just to confuse the alien prediction systems. "The key is to make absolutely no sense," Beth explained to her pilots during one of their briefing sessions. "Don't plan your attacks ahead of time. Don't follow any logical pattern. Just fly toward the enemy and do whatever feels right in the moment. The more random we are, the better our chances." Lieutenant Alex Parker commanded a group of converted cargo ships that had been turned into improvised bombers. His crews had loaded their holds with everything from nuclear warheads to barrels of industrial chemicals. The goal was not to create the most effective weapons, but to create the most unpredictable ones. "Today we're carrying antimatter bombs mixed with containers of coffee beans," Alex told his crew before one mission. "Tomorrow we might load up with plasma charges and boxes of children's toys. The Harvesters can't predict what we're going to do if we don't know what we're going to do ourselves." Dr. Lisa Harper had made her most important discovery yet while studying the quantum interference patterns created by human chaos. "The Harvesters exist partially in quantum dimensions," she explained to Kate during an emergency strategy meeting. "Their consciousness spans multiple realities simultaneously, which gives them incredible power but also makes them vulnerable to certain types of quantum disruption." The plan that emerged from Harper's research was beyond desperate. It was genuinely suicidal and had almost no chance of success. But it was also completely unpredictable, which made it the most human strategy possible. Every remaining human ship would need to simultaneously overload their reactors while in Earth's orbit. The combined quantum explosion would create a massive burst of chaotic energy that might temporarily sever the Harvesters' connection to their advanced technology. If the plan worked, the alien fleet would be vulnerable to conventional weapons for a brief period. The catch was obvious and terrible. Most of the crews would need to remain aboard their ships to ensure the reactors detonated properly. They would have only seconds to escape, and most would not make it to the life pods in time. Captain Kelly Ross volunteered to lead the suicide squadron aboard her destroyer, UES Fearless. She was joined by dozens of other commanders who understood that they were volunteering for a one-way mission. Engineers like Tony Graham worked frantically to maximize the quantum yield of each reactor explosion while minimizing the time needed for detonation. Pilot Rachel Stone spent her final hours recording messages for her family. She sat in the cockpit of her modified fighter and spoke into the communication recorder. "I want everyone to know that we're not doing this because we want to die. We're doing this because we refuse to let humanity be erased from the galaxy. If our sacrifice can give Earth even a small chance of survival, then it's worth it." Similar scenes played out across the human fleet. Families said goodbye to each other knowing they would never meet again. Engineers and pilots made final preparations for equipment they would never use again after the battle. But despite the sadness and fear, there was also something else: determination. As the Harvester fleet approached Earth, their massive ships blotted out entire sections of the starfield. They moved with the slow confidence of predators who had never been seriously challenged. Their energy signatures were so powerful that they interfered with human communication systems and made the space around Earth glow with alien light. The battle began exactly as every previous engagement had. Human ships opened fire with conventional weapons that passed harmlessly through the phasing Harvester vessels. The aliens responded with energy beams that tore through human shields like they were made of paper. Within minutes, dozens of human ships had been destroyed, but then something unprecedented happened. As Captain Kelly Ross led the volunteer squadron toward the Harvester flagship, the alien fleet hesitated. For the first time in 50,000 years of galactic extermination, the Harvesters encountered something their advanced calculations could not predict, an enemy that was deliberately choosing certain death over surrender. The quantum computers aboard the Harvester ship struggled to process what they were seeing. No rational species would sacrifice their entire fleet just to damage a superior enemy. The logical response to overwhelming force was surrender or retreat, not collective suicide. The alien prediction algorithms had no programming for dealing with such irrational behavior. This momentary confusion gave the human squadron the opening they needed. Ross and her volunteers reached optimal detonation range and began overloading their reactors simultaneously. For humanity, she transmitted on all frequencies as her ship's reactor reached critical overload. The explosion that followed was unlike anything that had ever occurred in Earth's orbit. Hundreds of human ships detonated their reactors at the same moment, creating a massive quantum shockwave that rippled through multiple dimensions. The chaotic energy burst was so powerful that it temporarily tore holes in the fabric of space itself. The Harvester fleet was caught completely off guard by the quantum explosion. Their ships, which existed partially in other dimensions, suddenly found themselves forced into normal space and cut off from their advanced technological systems. For the first time in millennia, Harvester vessels were solid, vulnerable, and confused. Admiral Kate Sullivan did not waste the opportunity. "All remaining ships, open fire," she ordered. "Hit them while they're solid." The surviving human vessels launched everything they had at the disabled Harvester fleet. Nuclear missiles, plasma cannons, and even old-fashioned projectile weapons struck alien hulls that could no longer phase away from the attacks. Ships that had seemed invulnerable moments before began to explode and break apart under the sustained human assault. But the quantum disruption effect was temporary. As the chaotic energy began to fade, some Harvester ships started to regain their phasing abilities. The battle was far from over, and humanity had used up most of their remaining ships in the suicide attack. Commander Jake Morrison somehow survived the reactor explosion by ejecting in an escape pod at the last possible second. As he drifted through space watching the battle unfold, he witnessed something that would become legend throughout human history. The Harvester fleet, faced with an enemy that had just destroyed itself rather than submit, began to retreat. These ancient destroyers of civilizations, who had eliminated hundreds of species without ever experiencing fear, turned and fled from Earth. They had encountered something their 50,000 years of experience had not prepared them for. A species that viewed certain death as just another tactical option. The human victory came at a terrible cost, but it was still a victory. For the first time since the attacks began, the galaxy learned that the Harvesters could be beaten. And they learned it from the most unlikely teachers. A species that had discovered their greatest weapon was their own stubborn refusal to surrender. The quantum explosion that saved Earth did something nobody expected. When the massive burst of chaotic energy tore through the Harvester fleet, it did more than just disable their ships. It forced the ancient aliens to experience something they had not felt in 50,000 years. Genuine emotion. The Harvesters had spent millennia as cold, calculating machines of destruction. They eliminated species based on mathematical equations and logical analysis. They felt no anger toward their victims and took no pleasure in destruction. They simply cleaned the galaxy according to their programming, like cosmic janitors removing unwanted life. But when the quantum chaos created by humanity's sacrifice flooded through their consciousness, everything changed. For the first time since, they had become the galaxy's self-appointed sterilizers. The Harvesters experienced fear, confusion, and doubt. The sensation was overwhelming and completely alien to their ancient minds. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from the bridge of the UES Indomitable as impossible things began happening across the battlefield. Harvester ships that had been retreating in perfect formation suddenly broke ranks and scattered in random directions. Some vessels stopped moving entirely as their crews struggled to process emotions they had forgotten how to handle. The surviving human ships pressed their attack, while the alien fleet remained confused and vulnerable. Nuclear warheads designed to penetrate planetary defenses smashed into crystalline hulls that could no longer phase away from the impacts. Energy weapons that had been useless before now carved deep wounds into ships that sparkled and bled strange light. Commander Jake Morrison led the final assault on the Harvester stronghold using tactics that would have been considered insane by any military academy. Instead of coordinated strikes against strategic targets, the Allied fleet attacked in completely random patterns. Ships would suddenly change direction in the middle of battle, weapons would fire at empty space for no apparent reason, and entire squadrons would retreat just when victory seemed certain. The Harvesters, still struggling with emotions they could not control, found it impossible to predict or counter such chaotic behavior. Their quantum computers, designed to calculate every possible outcome, overloaded trying to process the infinite randomness of human-inspired tactics. When the stronghold finally fell, it marked the end of 50,000 years of Harvester dominance in the galaxy. The ancient aliens who remained alive retreated to the empty spaces beyond the galactic rim, too confused and emotionally damaged to continue their mission of cosmic sterilization. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the observation deck of humanity's first post-war starship and looked out at the rebuilding Earth. The planet's population had been reduced to scattered millions, and most of the colonies were gone. But somehow, impossibly, humanity had survived, and in doing so had changed the entire galaxy. The quantum explosion that saved Earth had created something unprecedented in galactic history, unity among species that had never trusted each other before. The alliance that formed during the war against the Harvesters became the foundation for a new kind of civilization, one based on cooperation instead of conquest. Engineer Nancy Kim was working on the construction of the first joint human-alien research station. The facility would study the quantum effects that had made victory possible and develop new technologies based on controlled chaos theory. "We're learning that randomness isn't the opposite of order," she explained to her mixed crew of human and alien engineers. "It's a different kind of order that we're just beginning to understand." The galaxy had learned something important from humanity's example. Sometimes the best response to overwhelming power was not superior technology or careful strategy, but an overwhelming refusal to surrender. Sometimes the most effective weapon was the willingness to do things that made no logical sense but felt absolutely right. Pilot Joe Barnes now commanded training programs that taught alien species how to think like humans in combat situations. "The hardest part for most aliens is learning to ignore their own intelligence," he told his students. "They want to analyze every situation and plan the perfect response. But sometimes the perfect response is to stop thinking and just act on instinct." As years passed, the galaxy began to change in ways that no one had expected. Species that had hidden in fear for millennia emerged to share their knowledge and culture. Trade routes reopened, scientific cooperation flourished, and for the first time in recorded history, the universe knew true peace. The Harvesters became a distant memory, a cautionary tale about what happened when logic and calculation became more important than emotion and intuition. Children of a dozen different species learned about the humans who had faced certain extinction and chose to fight anyway. Commander Beth Walsh established the first Galactic Defense Academy, where young beings from across the universe came to learn human chaos tactics. "The most important lesson we can teach," she told her students, "is that surrender is always a choice. No matter how hopeless things seem, you can always choose to keep fighting." Dr. Lisa Harper's research into quantum consciousness became the foundation for a new understanding of how intelligence and emotion work together. Her discoveries led to breakthroughs in medicine, communication, and even art that enriched the lives of billions of beings across the galaxy. The universe that had once trembled in fear before the Harvesters now trembled in fear of something else entirely, the knowledge that somewhere out there was a species so stubborn, so determined, and so completely unpredictable that they had turned certain extinction into galactic liberation. Admiral Kate Sullivan now in her 70s, often stood on the bridge of her flagship and remembered the day when everything changed. Earth hung in space before her, rebuilt and thriving, surrounded by ships from dozens of different worlds. The silence that had once meant death and despair had been replaced by the constant chatter of a galaxy learning to live together. The age of harvester dominance was over. The age of human defiance had begun, and the universe would never be the same again. Humanity had proven that sometimes the most powerful force in existence was not advanced technology or superior firepower, but the simple refusal to give up when giving up was the only logical choice. As the stars shone down on a galaxy united by the example of one small, stubborn species, everyone knew that whatever challenges the future might bring, they would face them together. And if those challenges seemed impossible to overcome, they would remember the humans who had looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. The universe had learned to fear the power of beings who refused to fall, no matter how hard they were pushed. And that fear would keep the galaxy safe for generations to come. Drifted in his escape pod and watched the most incredible sight in human history unfold around him. The Harvester flagship, a vessel larger than most human cities, was actually running away from Earth. Its massive form flickered between dimensions as its crew tried desperately to escape the chaotic quantum field that surrounded the planet. Dr. Lisa Harper monitored the quantum readings from her station aboard the Indomitable and realized what was happening. Admiral, the quantum explosion didn't just disrupt their technology, it's affecting their consciousness directly. They're experiencing human emotions through the quantum interference patterns. The effect spread beyond just the ships near Earth. The quantum burst had been so powerful that it created ripples throughout hyperspace, carrying the essence of human determination and defiance to every corner of the galaxy. And everywhere the signal reached, sleeping civilizations began to stir. Engineer Sam Cole was working frantically to repair damaged systems, when his communication board suddenly came alive with signals from across the galaxy. Dozens of different alien species that had been hiding from the harvesters for centuries were emerging from their hiding places and sending messages of hope and determination. "Admiral, you need to hear this," Sam called out. He put the first transmission on the main speakers, and everyone on the bridge heard the voice of an alien species speaking in broken but understandable human language. "We are the Ethan people. We have hidden in fear for 3,000 years, since the harvesters destroyed our homeworlds. But your signal shows us that resistance is possible. We offer our ships to join your fight against the ancient enemy." More messages followed. The crystalline void dancers offered their knowledge of quantum manipulation. The insectoid hive builders promised to share their advanced manufacturing techniques. Species that humanity had never known existed were reaching out to offer help in the war against their common enemy. Captain Gary Hunt, one of the few squadron leaders to survive the Battle of Earth, found himself commanding the first joint fleet in galactic history. Human ships flew alongside alien vessels in formations that would have been impossible just weeks before. The tactics they used were purely human in origin. Chaotic, unpredictable, and completely illogical. The harvesters tried to adapt to their new situation, but they discovered that emotion was harder to control than technology. Fear made them hesitant to engage in battle. Doubt caused them to second-guess their ancient strategies. Confusion led them to make mistakes they had never made before in 50 millennia of galactic conquest.